The rhythmic beeping of construction vehicles pierced the pre-dawn silence, jolting Sarah Miller from her usual peaceful slumber. At first, she dismissed it as a dream. After all, no one would be doing construction at 5:30 a.m. on her private road. But the mechanical growls grew louder, accompanied by the sharp clangs of metal on metal. Still in her faded blue robe, coffee cup trembling in her hand, Sarah stepped onto her wraparound porch. The sight before her made her stomach drop. 3 orange construction vehicles lined her family's cherished private road, while workers in neon vests methodically uprooted the hand-carved stone markers her great-grandfather had placed there in 1923. Each marker, weathered but proud, had been a testament to the Miller family's stewardship of this land. Now they were being tossed into a truck bed like common debris. "Excuse me," Sarah called out, her voice cracking with a mix of disbelief and anger. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Her bare feet carried her down the porch steps, morning dew soaking into her slippers. The foreman, a stocky man with a clipboard, barely glanced up. "Ma'am, we're installing new community signage. HOA orders." He thrust a paper toward her with the mechanical efficiency of someone who dealt with angry residents before. Sarah snatched the document, her eyes scanning the official letterhead. Oak Haven Estates Homeowners Association. Notice of Infrastructure Integration. The words swam before her eyes. Pursuant to Municipal Code, Property Line Reassessment. Community Access Initiative. Her hands began to shake, causing drops of coffee to splatter onto the notice. "This is impossible," she managed. "We're not even part of Oak Haven Estates. This road has been private property since 1892. I have the deeds to prove it." Her great-grandfather's weathered documents were safely stored in her home office, a proud reminder of their family's history. The foreman shrugged. "Take it up with the HOA board, ma'am. We're just doing our job." Behind him, his crew continued their work, erecting sleek Oak Haven Community Drive signs, where the historic markers had stood moments before. Sarah watched in horror as they installed a speed limit sign next to her grandmother's prized hydrangea bush, the same bush that had been photographed in 4 generations of Miller family portraits. The modern metal post looked as out of place as a smartphone at a Victorian tea party. Rushing back inside, Sarah's 80 professional instincts kicked in. She began documenting everything, taking photos and videos of the construction crew's activities. Her hands shook as she called her neighbor, Tom Thompson, whose family had lived at the end of the road for just as long as hers. "Tom, you need to get out here now," she said urgently. "They're stealing our road." As the morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the newly installed signs, Sarah stood on her porch, clutching her great-grandfather's property documents. She watched as regular cars began using her road for the first time in its history, their drivers emboldened by the official-looking new signage. In that moment, she realized this wasn't just about a road, it was about preserving a legacy, and she would not let it be paved over by an HOA's overreach. The town hall buzzed with nervous energy as Sarah straightened her blazer, her presentation materials organized with military precision. The local news crew had set up in the back, their cameras trained on the podium. Oak Haven's board members sat in the front row, Victor Reynolds wearing his trademark smug smile. Sarah's nephew Kevin had positioned himself strategically with his phone, ready to livestream. His previous TikTok videos documenting the daily traffic chaos had already garnered millions of views, with hashtags like #HOA and #SaveMillerRoad trending locally. The viral attention had caught the eye of State Representative Garcia, who sat quietly in the audience. "Before we begin," Reynolds stood, his voice oily smooth, "I want to remind everyone that Oak Haven Estates has always acted in the community's best interest." "Let her speak," came a shout from the back. Mrs. Thompson had arrived with her entire bridge club in tow, each wearing homemade Save Our Streets buttons. Sarah took the podium, her hands steady as she connected her laptop. The first slide appeared, a simple aerial view of the neighborhood from 1923, her great-grandfather's road, a quiet thread through pristine woodland. 5 years ago, this was a peaceful community, she began. Today, I'm going to show you how one man's greed turned our paradise into a parking lot. Over the next 30 minutes, Sarah methodically laid out her evidence. Drone footage showed the daily traffic nightmare. Traffic statistics revealed a 900% increase in vehicles. Property value charts demonstrated the devastating impact on residential areas, while simultaneously showing the suspicious rise in Reynolds' commercial property values. The room fell silent as she revealed the web of shell companies, all leading back to Reynolds. His smile had vanished, replaced by a tight-lipped grimace. The killing blow came when Sarah played a compilation of resident stories: children no longer able to ride bikes, elderly residents trapped in their homes, gardens destroyed by exhaust fumes. The final clip showed Mrs. Thompson's tearful attempt to leave her driveway that rainy Wednesday. "This isn't about property values," Sarah concluded. "This is about community. This is about protecting our homes from those who see them as nothing more than pieces on a monopoly board." Representative Garcia stood up. "Ms. Miller, would you be willing to testify before the state legislature? We've been investigating similar cases across the district." Reynolds attempted to interject, but was drowned out by applause. The HOA board members began to distance themselves from him, both literally and figuratively, as reporters pressed forward with questions about his real estate dealings. Within weeks, the dominoes fell. The state investigation led to Reynolds' resignation and criminal charges for fraud. The HOA board was dissolved and reformed under resident oversight. Sarah's road, along with others, was returned to its rightful owners. The Miller Act passed the state legislature 6 months later, establishing strict guidelines for HOA territory expansion and protecting private property rights. Sarah's great-grandfather's stone markers were restored to their rightful place, and Mrs. Thompson could finally back out of her driveway in peace. As Sarah stood by the newly restored markers, watching children ride their bikes again on the quiet road, she realized that sometimes the greatest victories come not from fighting alone, but from helping a community find its voice. Sarah's transformation from mild-mannered ET specialist to legal warrior began at midnight, hunched over her laptop with her third cup of green tea. Her dining room walls, once adorned with family photos, now showcased a complex web of documents, property maps, and sticky notes connected by red string, a physical manifestation of the conspiracy she was slowly unraveling. During her lunch breaks, she began visiting the county records office. The elderly clerk, Martha, initially watched with curiosity as Sarah pored over dusty property records, but soon became an enthusiastic ally. "You know," Martha whispered one day, sliding an ancient leather-bound book across the counter, "Oak Haven's been playing this game for years. Look at the Henderson farm on Pine Ridge. Same story, different year." The breakthrough came when Sarah discovered a pattern. Every road the HOA had acquired over the past 5 years connected to properties owned by shell companies. Following the digital breadcrumbs through public records, she traced all these companies back to one name: Victor Reynolds, Oak Haven's board president and owner of Reynolds Real Estate Development. Her online post about the situation caught the attention of James Chen, a retired property lawyer who'd fought similar battles. "This isn't just about your road anymore," he told her during their first meeting at a local coffee shop. "This is about stopping a systematic land grab that's happening all across the county." Together, they built a case that was impossible to ignore. Sarah's skills proved invaluable as she created a database documenting every unauthorized HOA expansion, complete with before and after satellite imagery showing the dramatic changes in traffic patterns. The evidence was damning. Property values in acquired areas had actually decreased due to increased traffic, while Reynolds' commercial properties had skyrocketed in value thanks to their newly improved access roads. The movement grew. Sarah started hosting weekly meetings in her living room, which soon overflowed with affected homeowners sharing similar stories. Mrs. Thompson brought her famous lemon bars, while Tom Thompson's daughter, a journalism student, began documenting testimonies for a possible documentary. But the HOA fought back dirty. First came the fines for unauthorized gatherings, then for improper yard maintenance when Sarah's grass grew half an inch too tall. Anonymous complaints about her property multiplied. One morning, she found her mailbox knocked over, her great-grandfather's hand-forged post twisted beyond repair. The intimidation tactics only fueled Sarah's determination. She worked late into the night, building a website that mapped every HOA land acquisition against Reynolds' property holdings. The pattern was undeniable, like a spider's web with Reynolds Developments at the center. Each new road acquisition created convenient access routes to his commercial properties. The final piece fell into place when Martha, the county clerk, discovered a crucial detail in the original Oak Haven charter. Any territory expansion required a supermajority vote from all existing members, a vote that had never taken place for any of the road acquisitions. Sarah smiled as she added this document to her growing wall of evidence. Tomorrow was the town hall meeting, and she was ready to expose everything. The HOA had no idea what was coming. 2 weeks into what Sarah now called the takeover, she sat in her home office, watching through her window as an endless parade of vehicles crawled past. The quiet country lane that once saw maybe 10 cars a day had morphed into an unofficial bypass route. Her laptop displayed a popular navigation app where her private road now appeared as a convenient shortcut between Oak Haven Estates and the bustling Riverdale shopping district. The transformation was jarring. Every morning, the parade began at 6:45 a.m. Compact cars and SUVs filled with commuters clutching travel mugs, all trying to shave precious minutes off their morning drive. By mid-morning, delivery trucks would begin their assault, their GPS systems now confidently routing them down the narrow lane that barely fit their width. The road's ancient oaks, which had stood sentinel for over a century, now bore ugly scars from side-view mirrors and scraping panels. Sarah's breaking point came on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. She was on a video call with her development team when she heard the commotion outside. Mrs. Thompson, her 78-year-old neighbor who had been like a second grandmother to her, stood in her driveway in the rain, desperately trying to back out. A line of impatient drivers had formed, horns blaring, nobody willing to yield the space she needed to maneuver. "I have to call you back," Sarah told her team. Rushing outside with an umbrella, she found Mrs. Thompson in tears, her hands trembling on the steering wheel of her silver Volvo. "I've been trying to leave for my doctor's appointment for 15 minutes, Mrs. Thompson explained, her voice shaking. "They just keep coming. One young man even made a crude gesture at me." Sarah stepped into the road, forcing traffic to stop. The fury in the drivers' faces as they were delayed by mere seconds made her blood boil. One woman in a luxury SUV rolled down her window. "This is a public road now. You can't just stop traffic." Later that afternoon, the sound of splintering wood drew Sarah outside again. A delivery truck, attempting to navigate the road's sharp turn near her driveway, had misjudged the angle. The massive maple tree that her grandmother had planted as a young bride in 1945 now sported a gashing wound along its trunk, its branches entangled with the truck's roof rack. The driver was already on his phone with his supervisor. "Yeah, these residential streets are getting tricky. The app says this is the fastest route, but these trees are a hazard." Sarah photographed the damage and immediately emailed the HOA board. Their response came within hours, clinical and dismissive. The Oak Haven Estates HOA is committed to improving property values through enhanced connectivity. The removal of hazardous vegetation may be necessary to ensure safe passage. We appreciate your understanding as we modernize our community infrastructure. That night, as Sarah lay in bed listening to the endless swish of tires on asphalt, she realized this wasn't just about inconvenience anymore. This was about the systematic destruction of a place that had been preserved through generations. Tomorrow, she decided, the real fight would begin.